Onassis Foundation. Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello, it's Steve.
Hello, is this Steve Roach?
This is.
Hello, Steve. This is Paul Holdengräber calling you from the Quarantine Tapes. I'm so delighted that you could take our call. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. Yes, really happy to be speaking with you, Paul. Thank you.
Tell me, Steve, how have you been spending these last 6 months? What have you been up to?
Yes, the last 6 months is in many ways not so different than the previous 6 months in that I would say I don't spend, but I invest a great amount of time in my desert studio, and I work in solitude, and I work, alone, and I work in a focused state pretty much day and night. So that kind of discipline has remained the same. Of course, the atmosphere around that in the world now, of course, is forever is changed. So that piece has brought in a different sense of how I'm responding to what I'm creating, what I'm feeling, the need to create, and the inspiration to create, and the desire to really turn up my creative juices to about as high as it can operate at this point, and let it flow, in that way.
Talk to me about what this moment has conspired you to do perhaps differently in your work.
Yeah, I would say my sense of feeling in a lot of ways like I'm like a first responder in sound and music right now. So there's a kind of an urgency, and there's a sense of creating music and releasing music and getting it out there in the world with that kind of, with this kind of feeling that it needs to be out there. I need to be sharing this with the audience, with people that are receptive and open and needing this kind of sonic medicine, this kind of support right now. So I've had that philosophy along the way. I've referred to the work that I do as creating this term I use, the music is the medicine. So you can use it in ways for self-care and for creating spaces of safety and personal sanctuary and support from the whir and increasing noise level of the world. So, all of that has been accelerating and basically evolving to this point now. I'm feeling optimistic, but also, with this sense of what's tomorrow going to bring, while at the same time wanting to stay focused into the present moment and stay, grounded with everything that's going on, and filter in what kind of information is coming in that I don't need to know about. I just need to stay focused on the work that I'm doing, stay healthy and stay calm and stay inspired.
Tell me, from where you sit now or stand now, what are you seeing? What are you seeing out of your window? I know that the desert has had a profound influence on your work, and I'm wondering how that desert, if that's what you're seeing now, might feed your imagination, that landscape might feed your imagination.
Yes, well, my studio at this point is in it's called Baja, Arizona. It's southern Arizona, and it's fairly close to the border of Mexico. And from my window right here at my mixing console, I'm looking out maybe 75 miles out into the horizon line. And so that it's like a tabula rasa state. It's a clean slate looking out. There's a few houses out there in the distance, but on the most part, it's really very inspiring metaphor for this clean slate of creativity that I wake up to every day and start drawing from. And sometimes that, let's say I wake up every day in a creative mode, and some days it's a completely clean slate, and in other days, what I would say is the downloads that come in to my consciousness, to my creative impulses are quite active, and so it already starts the momentum. But the lifelong connection to the desert, which started as a young person growing up in Southern California, in San Diego, and my parents were very connected to being in nature, and especially spending a lot of time in the deserts early on. So that set the soul tone for me for a place that I connect to for safety and for creating sanctuary and for connecting into a sense of space and time that exists out of our measured sense of space and time when, let's say, we're living more deeper into a city environment. And I know well from living in Los Angeles for 10 years in the deep end of the artist community there that how time changes when I was living in Culver City or Santa Monica or Venice. That particular time period was constantly driving me to drive out to Joshua Tree and the Mojave Desert areas and to immerse in those spaces in order to tap into these spaces that I'm so drawn to creating, which again is changing your sense of time and your sense of physical location and deepening the connection to the inner aspects of your own core.
I read, Steve, that you're fascinated by different conceptions of time, as you were saying, and you've said to understand your own concept of time, not to mention any other societies, you have to be willing to delve into those areas of human experience that are usually left unconscious. Can you say something about that process? You had started to, but I'd like you to go deeper.
Yes, I would say, the connection to those areas, those states of what I refer to as the states from the in-between, those states where, I'm reaching for something that I'm very aware of and have been since I can remember in various degrees of development as a younger person, and then growing through that and evolving that, understanding it more, but just that connection to deep solitude and the kind of awareness and awakening that blooms within my consciousness before even the impulse to create occurs. So there's this sense of connection and this sense of knowing, and this sense I would call it a feeling it's a feeling that becomes very tangible, and it becomes so tangible that at the point at which I was driven to make music, or to make this kind of music that's drawn from sound, and the sounds themselves are the tools to which I can then play with time, where I can slow time down, I can accelerate time, I can combine the aspects of slow time and faster time. And you'll hear that in a lot of my music, where I'll have certain beats per minute, certain sequence patterns, melodic forms, rhythmic forms that are accelerating and running at a higher tempo, while at the same time I'm juxtaposing these expansive broad vista landscapes like I'm looking out at right now. So that's just one way of a technical aspect of how I'm able to experiment with those and ultimately use my own consciousness and my own years of living and breathing and experiencing music at this level that is just absolutely visceral. The doors that it continues to open, that's part of what drives a big piece that drives my passion to create at the level that I do, at this, very prolific nature. But it's, in that sense, it really connects into breathing, and how vital it is that as we learn to breathe and feel breath, and how important that is to being alive. To me, music and sound and creativity has that same elemental need where it's like breathing, and it's like it's nourishment, and so the deeper and further I go into those places that are sometimes that can be like if you go into a new area you're not used to being in, and you find yourself hiking into a canyon and you're getting deeper into that canyon, you've never been there before, you might have it mapped out a bit in advance, but maybe not, but there's that kind of exhilaration, and then there's an apprehension, or there's kind of a fear inside of that you need to work with. And then as you get more familiar with that, with all of those unknowns, then it becomes, you integrate that into then settling into a more expanded state and place of self-knowledge, and also expanded states of trust in your creative process, having that courage to go deeper and further and more to the edge of your own creativity. Yeah.
The way you talk about sound, Steve, makes me nearly feel that in sound there's something tactile.
Absolutely so. That's it. I mean, really, Paul, it's that there's something where I feel, and I've felt this way with this sense of synesthesia, where I hear sounds and I taste sounds and I can feel sounds and I can see colors associated with sounds. That came on very early, in the 70s, when I was first getting my hands especially onto to synthesizers, which create such a range of sound, and sound that you can treat really like almost like these very, very fine-tuned surgical tools for exploring your own consciousness with sounds that all of my sounds are designed and created and shaped from my hands and from this tabula rasa state. I use no sounds that are really coming from a factory set or a synthesizer or something, but the texture and the timbre of the sound and the feeling of the sound is very, very alive in my work in terms of how I explain or use the idea of different clay or rock surfaces or metal or silk, or there's all these different sort of tactile references I'll be using with the music.
It makes me think of nearly like a potter leaving imprints on the vase he might be forming. So I think I heard you say at one moment, taste. So it's tactile and taste, all of it connected in some way. And you've spoken about your lifelong devotion to the art of living in the deep end of sound. Can you give a sense of what that deep end of sound sounds like?
What it sounds like is just this constantly unfurling adventure into the body of work that at any moment the curious mind and ear can hear hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces that I'm compelled to create that are the documentation of these explorations. And I'm just so grateful and fortunate and just born at the right time with technology, the way that it has birthed these opportunities for someone like myself who might not have been able to find my way in the world with the kind of desire to create that I do with sound until at this point in time in the last 30, 40 years or so, where you can actually have a full state-of-the-art studio in your house and live the life of a painter like a painter would 100 years ago, where you have all that you need in a studio in Paris or in Joshua Tree or in southern Arizona, and then you can do your work. And it's the same for me, that sense of immersing in sound. I sleep with my music all the time. The music of pieces that are sustained, that have no sense of beginning or end, those are pieces that I continue to work on when I sleep. So I'll have certain pieces that are 60, 70 minutes, 80 minutes, or quite a bit longer, sometimes hours long, that are playing, or they're running live in the studio. They're not recorded. They're running live from the instruments that are able to sustain and play like an eternal flame that's burning. So with that approach of having the instruments alive, I can hear sounds and tempos and qualities of. It's beyond music. It's really like the transformative power of sound, And so I can come in after hearing a sound for 2 or 3 days, and then at that point I'm hearing it down at a much more deeper level, obviously. But I can get down inside of it and I can slow things down, let's say, inside of that sound even more, or I can add a few brushstrokes into it, to the inside of it, that brings in another sense of awareness that you cannot find words in our language to assign to that. And so that's a big piece in my motivations, is to continue to map out these places that go beyond being able to explain it to you in an interview. It can only be listened to and experienced, and then in that sense it almost completes itself in the mind and the ear, through the ears and the mind of, and the perception of everyone that hears it. It can sound different to will sound different to everyone,
and at different moments in life it sounds different.
Absolutely, with what you bring to it and the influences of what your whole biosystem, your whole foundation, what you're bringing to it through your emotional base. And so recently, through this COVID reality in April, my mom, who was in a Alzheimer's home and all 90 years old, but she passed away from would have been complications of COVID, and she was definitely close to the edge anyway. But
I'm sorry.
That came through, and so in the midst of my absolute working every day at this first responder level, then I immediately went to the place when that call came in at 7 at night. By 7:30, I was recording and creating a piece for her. She was very supportive of my music and through it all, and so I immediately went to that place, and so that album came out about 6 weeks ago, and it's called A Soul Ascends. That was created over 7 days of just day and night of wanting to create a piece that for me I could offer to her after her passing, and however you want to interpret that, but just I wanted to create something that would be like a piece that would create support and accompany her to wherever that's going to be, and for it's certainly it's accompanying me where I need to be with her passing. So there was all of that piece was wrapped up in it too. But when it was released, I didn't release it as a piece for my mother's passing. I wanted the piece to go out into the world at this time without the influence of that upon anyone who would hear it for a certain period of time. I figured at a certain moment in time I would share that other part of what drew this piece forward, because it came out and it received very warm, very positive responses, and a lot of the folks who've been listening to my music for years could feel something was like, something's in here I haven't heard before. And so that was powerful and validating to have that acknowledgement. It's
like giving a gift.
Giving a gift back to your mother who gave you the gift of life. That is huge. Nothing is more huge than that to me. And she gave me so much. And so eventually I had an interview with the NPR station in Tucson, and then they asked, well, what this astute interviewer, a young Russian lady who really knows my music, was asking and inquiring about how it had this other feeling to it. And so at that point I shared that story, and then that created like a whole new wave of response to that music. And then I started receiving and reading a lot of feedback from a lot of people who had just recently lost family members, both from COVID and from just natural causes and whatnot. So it really opened up, and it was a gift for me at that point and a blessing to get that back.
So beautiful. And I'm wondering if there's any way you could give us the gift of a bit of your music.
Well, absolutely. As we conclude with the interview, I'll have that music for you.
You've said, Steve, that the shamans serve an important purpose. That shamans serve an important purpose in their tribes precisely because they live outside the culture and see through it. Do you feel a kinship with shamans in that particular way? And what would it mean to live outside of and see through the culture we're part of here now in America?
Well, absolutely. I feel kinship to the path of the shaman, where you're going into places that, as I mentioned earlier, can be places that a lot of people do not want to go to. It's just not comfortable, or it's not like a lot of people sign up to be working in solitude for 40 years. I'm not like sitting completely alone here, and I still live a very solitary life. I have a life that's very different than what most people would think of. And even in the relationships that I have, I still have to have an immense amount of time to where I'm focused on my work and my music. That's really my first relationship, and my longest running relationship is the music that I do. And my relationship to sound, and my relationship to the space that I have to inhabit to bring this music through, which quite often will not include sound or music at all. And when I'm in my habitat here, I have, my studio is basically a house that's, away from everyone. It's this space that it's like my shaman's cave that I have, that's set up with everything that I need to access, and that piece is what feeds and it lets me go into this place of non-linear time, where I can go to places for long periods of time. I can stay up till 6 a.m. if I need to, if I'm in a space, and then, everything is open for negotiation every day of what I need to do to respond to what's coming through and the places that I need to go to. So, and that takes, over the years, there's this agility that I've built and developed to have that kind of relationship where you're moving between the worlds, and you have to, it takes a lot of, I would say, practice, like anything, like where you exercise your body, or you exercise your mind, or you exercise this component of having this kind of freedom to go off the map, and without any voices telling you, well, you shouldn't be doing that, or that's not right, or that's not normal, or whatever, all the things that can be imprinted upon you through society, or through your family, or through your different relationships. All of that has to be burned up. It has to be put into the fire, and has to go away to go to the place that I need to be, This is what drives and creates, what drives a person to, have 250 albums out, or whatever it is. I mean, I don't count them, but I read that in interviews or something where somebody's counted them. And it's just, it's like, to me, if you're tapped into that infinite source, why would you put any limits on that? That's like, well, I'm just, you're too inspired. You got to slow down and like give it a break. And to me, that's just like, well, Paul, I think you're breathing too much. You got to stop breathing so much. Chill out on feeling the passion of life. Well, that's just, forget it, And right now, that energy that we're speaking about is what I want to continue to turn up to, the next level of beyond 11 on the volume knob, and just keep delivering that to folks that are tuned in to what it is that I'm doing. And I know it's not for everyone. It's all about perception, and some people would perceive it in their own way, and that's perfectly beautiful. But for those who get it, well, here it is, and I've just never felt more empowered and inspired and focused to keep delivering it up like this. So
I read that among the people who matter to you, Rothko, the painter Rothko, has mattered greatly to you, and I'm really not surprised. He said once something that always strikes me as profound, and I'm wondering how it resonates for you. It's just 4 words. He said, "Silence is so accurate."
That's a Rothko quote.
It is.
Yes, that's it. That is it. And I stood there at the Rothko Museum in Houston and looked into the void of his pieces that were as large as a full-sized, massive wall. And that was another moment in time where the download came in of what is possible with art, visual, music, and when you have that unrelenting desire and drive to create, and you have, the courage to create and to go off the map and to go off into places where maybe, it's just there's a lot of gray areas there, and I love the gray areas. I mean, you can see it in the song titles that I create, Fade to Gray and Between the Gray and Purple, and I mean all of these titles start to reveal a kind of audio biographical roadmap of where I want to be, where I want to go, and what I want to share, to inspire, and to change the sense of where we draw smaller boundaries around ourselves and step out of that and go into a larger, more expansive or endless kind of place. One that doesn't have to be explained all the time or put words to all the time, but a place that we just can trust and know and step deeper into and draw from that and live from that place.
Steve, will you leave us with some music for a moment or two?
Yes, I feel the piece of A Soul Ascends would be a beautiful piece to go out with, so to speak.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you so much, Steve Roach, for taking my call.
Thank you so much, Paul. Deeply appreciate it. Blessings to you and everyone there through this time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.